doesn't really matter when you take them, but I do recommend. I haven't met many Uchicago students who are the biggest fans of the better the professor, the harder it is. If I had to do it again, I would have probably done my social. It is a lot of fun. What's going on, people? My name is Maxim. I'm graduating from Uchicago next quarter, and I just completed all the required core classes and want to share my core experience to help you guys make the most informed decisions on what core classes you should take and when you should take them to optimize for your potential major and your Uchicago experience. So without further ado, let's get into it. As a disclaimer, everything that I'm going to say was based entirely on my experience or the experiences of people I spoke to. So it's very likely that you will hear completely different opinions from other people. So please take everything that I'm going to say with a grain of salt. The core is essentially the courses you have to complete outside your majors, minors, and electives in order to graduate from Uchicago. And I like to think of the core as 3 separate bundles. I'll introduce them now, but we'll get into the details of each core requirement within each bundle later on. Within the first bundle, you have to complete 6 courses. You have to complete at least 1 art, at least 2 humanities, and at least 2 civilization studies. And for the 6th and final course, you can either choose to complete 1 more art, humanity, or civilization study. The writing requirement you will actually complete whilst doing your humanities requirement. I don't actually remember what we had to do, but I wouldn't stress over it, and hopefully you should get a pass next to your writing requirement on your transcript. The next bundle is the social sciences. Uchicago is very strict with this one. It must be completed within the same sequence and within the same academic year, which basically means that you have to take the first social science in your autumn quarter, and then you will be automatically enrolled into the next sequence of the same social science that you enrolled in your autumn quarter for your winter quarter, and then you'll be automatically enrolled into the next sequence of that same social science for your spring quarter, and then therefore you complete your social science requirement within the same academic year. This is very important because you have to choose your social science wisely, because you're kind of stuck with it for the rest of the academic year. So read ahead to make sure you actually chose what you want to read and write long essays about. And then the final bundle, you will take 6 courses. You'll have to take at least 1 math, at least 2 physics, and at least 2 biological sciences. And for your 6th and final course, you can either choose to take another math, physical science, or biological science. And for the language competency requirement for all incoming first year students, before you can actually choose the courses, you will take those assessments that will place you in appropriate classes. If you're proficient in a non-English language, you might be able to waiver that requirement completely. So you might not need to take another language, meaning that you will only have to take 15 core requirements. If you don't know any other languages, you might have to take 1 or 2 foreign language courses. I haven't heard or met anyone who had to take all 3. So best case, you know a foreign language quite well, you only take 15 core courses. Worst case, you take 16 to 17. Let's get into the details and my experiences with some of these courses and what I've learned from Uchicago core. I'm not going to lie, I haven't met many Uchicago students who are the biggest fans of the core, and I definitely wasn't one of them at the beginning of my studies. I simply couldn't understand why I need to study biology again when I knew I wasn't very good at it, I knew I hated it, and I knew it had no implication for what I want to do in the future. And a lot of students I spoke to shared similar feelings and opinions about other core requirements as well. Unfortunately, the core doesn't care about your feelings and what you like and don't like, and everyone has to take the requirements. And as a result, I've seen students take 2 different pathways. So pathway number 1 is for the core requirements that you completely despise. You know you're not good at them, you know you don't want to do them, they have no future utility for you and you just kind of want to get them done and over with. In those kind of situations, students tend to opt out for the easiest courses in whatever the core requirement is, and tend to take them with their friends as well. In that sense, obviously, like in your friend group, you can work together and the courses become somewhat more relatively fun. As I said, that approach is great and I really recommend it for the core courses that you completely don't care about, or you just don't want to allocate a lot of your time doing them, which is also great in your second and third year when you start to get into those harder major courses that require you to spend more time and effort and attend office hours, and that you're just generally more interested in doing because it's something that you will potentially use in your future. So they're great as a balancing point. And whilst we're on this topic, you could see that from the outline, they recommend that you complete them in the first and second years. I don't think that's great advice because there are just some courses that are significantly easier and more enjoyable than the courses that you'll take in your major. And I do think it's quite smart to kind of spread those core requirements over your 4 years so you can essentially balance the harder major courses, as I said, during your second and third year with the lighter core courses to make it all kind of balanceable and so you don't go crazy. So that's approach number one. Approach number two is what I call simply the interest or the curiosity approach. I strongly advocate you to go for that approach, whether in your core classes or your major classes. Let's take, for example, like I said, biology. It was the case for me where I took nutritional science as my kind of second biology class and I loved it. Like I had a great time. Was it tedious and boring at times? Yes, but to be honest, I've learned a lot and I used some of the knowledge that I've learned like still to this day. So I do strongly advise, even with the core requirements that you think are going to be completely relevant for you, do take the time to read at least like the course description, if not like the course feedback and evaluation, to maybe find snippets that you might find interesting, which might sway you to be like, okay, this like seems pretty cool, like I want to learn more about this. So that's the approach number two. Now let's get into the specificity of each core requirement. Going in order, the art requirement has definitely been the most fun and enjoyable out of all the core requirements for me. It's completely different from the rest of the core requirements. It's a lot more social and it really forces you to go outside of your social comfort zone. I took a course called Thinking and Moving, and I remember we literally entered the studio and began to move and dance freely in space, and at the beginning it was very awkward because no one knew each other and we didn't understand what we're actually going to do. But as the course progressed, everyone got really comfortable with moving freely in space, and for the midterm and the final we had to come up, perform and explain our in-class performances. And because these art courses are very social, they're a great way to meet loads of new people across different year groups and majors, which is why I believe the college prioritizes first years, because it's just great to meet like loads of new people straight away. Having said that, I did take both of my art courses in the autumn quarter of my final year, and I did that to balance them with the more mentally demanding and therefore time consuming major courses that I was taking at the time. So with the arts, it doesn't really matter when you take them, but I do recommend taking them with the more Uchicago rigorous courses that you will take in your major or just in general. I strongly advocate for you to take 2 art courses. The other very popular one is called Acting Fundamentals, but be careful when you do plan your schedule because they're very popular. A lot of people are going to sign up, so you have to be smart with how many popular classes you're pre-registering for to make sure you actually get all of them. There are 2 scenarios in which it wouldn't make sense to take 2 art courses. The first one is if you do a civilization study abroad, which is where you go abroad and complete your 3 civilization study sequences. Personally, I didn't do that. I do regret not doing it. From all my friends that went, they had the best time of their life. You know, you're in a different country, you're not working as much, like you're still working, but it is a lot of fun. So do check the programs that you might be interested in advance and plan your years accordingly. But most of the people do take the civilization study abroad in their third year, ideally winter, because you want to escape from the cold Chicago, but any quarter works. And surprisingly, a lot of students also do a study abroad in their final year. So that's the scenario number one, in which it doesn't make sense to take 2 art courses. Scenario number two, again, depending on the intended majors that you want to pursue, some, not many, but some do require you to take 3 humanities. So again, like, please check all the requirements and plan accordingly. My general advice for both the civilization studies and humanities, take the ones that you're the most interested in. If you're not interested in both, which to be honest was the case for me, either take the easiest ones or just take any one with your friends. Also with humanities, be extremely careful. Some require you to read and write a lot, others don't. For example, I took media aesthetics. I definitely read less than what I heard from other humanities, but to be honest, I had a great time. I really enjoyed the course. And with the humanities, it's not what, well, I mean, again, depends on kind of what you want to do with the humanities. At least for me, it wasn't what I learned in them, but the writing workshops that were extremely helpful, because you are actually taught how to structure and write a good essay. And my general advice for succeeding in humanities, civilization studies, and social sciences, do very good in your drafts. Go to your professors or writing instructors and like just ask them for feedback. And as simple as it sounds, just rewrite your paper with their feedback and maybe give it back to them again and rewrite it again after they gave you more feedback. But that's literally like the ultimate way of succeeding in those courses. Another important aspect for humanities, because most, if not all, students have to take them in their first year. If you didn't do a lot of reading and writing in your final years of high school, which was the case for me because I did the A level, which is like the UK education system, and I took maths, econ, and chemistry. So I literally haven't had to read or write except for my college essays for the last 2 years. So I did want to kind of ease myself into like reading and writing heavy text again, which I strongly advise if you haven't also read or written much in your last couple of years of high school. Moving on to social sciences, students usually take them either in their first or second year. I took power in my first year, and the rationale behind that decision was, just like with my humanity, I simply wanted to get it out the way. If you are going to take your humanity and your social science at the same time, I strongly encourage that you choose one of them to be lighter on the readings. I've seen what happens to people who take both difficult humanities and social sciences at the same time, and for a lack of a better word, they simply get cooked. So wouldn't recommend. I was very fortunate in a sense that my humanity was a lot lighter in reading compared to my social science. So I did spend a lot more of my time on my social science compared to my humanity. So it's definitely manageable if you're sensible about choosing the right social sciences and humanities. However, if I had to do it again, I would have probably done my social science in my second year. And another reason for that also is I do encourage you guys to challenge yourself with the social sciences. I think, well, at the time, I didn't think that the texts that we read were great, but maybe I was just like too immature at the time. But looking back on it, like, I would have liked to spend even more time on those texts, and I do think I would have appreciated them a lot more. And just in general, I think the ability to read and attempt to analyze and interpret and write about such difficult books will set you up for success regardless of what you want to do in your future. So I do strongly encourage you to challenge yourself with the social sciences. However, if you do want to take the easier ones, I've heard mind is pretty chill. So yeah, that's social sciences. And also, as I mentioned earlier, don't forget that because it's a sequence, you have to commit to a social science. So if you chose power, you do power 1 in your autumn quarter, and then you're automatically enrolled into power 2 for your winter quarter, and then you're automatically enrolled into power 3 for your spring quarter. Like, you can't jump in between the sequences. So once again, choose wisely. For the math, physics, and biology core requirements, I strongly encourage you to look at the required courses for the majors you're thinking of majoring in, as most of the majors have very specific math, physics, and biology courses that you need to take to satisfy that major. And most of those courses also satisfy the math, physics, or biology core requirements. For example, for the math major, you must take a very specific physics sequence that also satisfies the physics core requirement. And in that case, it can be extremely helpful to have an understanding of the majors you want to major in early in your Uchicago career, because let's say you decided to become a math major and you either take that physics sequence in your first or second year. If later then down the line you decide that you no longer want to be a math major, you will not need to take additional physics courses to satisfy the physics core requirement, because the physics sequence that you took for your math major already satisfies the physics core requirement. However, on the other side, if at the beginning you didn't know what you wanted to major in and you chose the physics core courses that satisfy the physics core requirement but don't satisfy the math major requirement, you will then have to take that additional physics sequence that satisfies the math major requirement. Summarizing my core recommendations, I do believe the most important recommendation is to double check your major requirements for potential core overlaps. This can eliminate a lot of stress with finding out that you have to take additional courses to satisfy your major requirement, which can eliminate the stress of trying to fit all those additional courses into your calendar, and therefore eliminate the stress of not knowing whether you can graduate on time. So very important, please do your research in advance. My second recommendation is for you to prioritize your interest over the difficulty of the course. And what I mean by that is, say you need to take a biology course to complete your biology core requirement. You're thinking of 2 courses, you've read the descriptions for both of them. One of them is known to be easy and all your friends are going to take it and they're forcing you to take it with them as well. The other course will probably be harder. However, it sounds a lot more interesting to you. And in that case, I do recommend that you take the course that sounds a lot more interesting, purely because I believe you will learn and enjoy a lot more. But up to you. Not directly related to this point, I know I haven't spoken about the professors yet. From my personal experience, the better the professor, the harder it is to get an A on their course, and there are obviously exceptions to this rule. And also, in my personal experience, Uchicago students do tend to judge the quality of the professors by how easy it is to get an A on their course. My personal advice, I would be very careful with the course evaluations, and I would actually encourage you to go to the different sections of the same class for different professors, just to understand kind of what teaching style works best for you, and then kind of switch sections if you still can. My third recommendation is for you to take a challenging social science. As I previously said, I do believe the stress and the hard work that you'll have to put in are worth for the skills that you will develop, as those skills are essentially universal and you'll be able to use them for anything that you decide to do in your future. For my fourth recommendation, some cores are significantly easier than other cores, and they're definitely significantly easier than your major courses. And for that reason, I do believe it makes a lot of sense to balance those easier cores with more challenging cores or more challenging major courses in the same quarter. For my final recommendation, which is really the last resort, if you know that there are certain core requirements that you simply couldn't care less about and just want to get them done with, I strongly encourage you to take the easiest courses that you can and do them with your friends, so at least you have somewhat of a good time. Hopefully that was somewhat useful. If I missed anything out, or if you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments below. Until then, thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.